Good morning, everyone. My name is Kiva Kushan. I'm with the Arizona Office of Tourism. I'm the Director of Industry Affairs here. As you heard yesterday, we are entering into a new partnership with Leave No Trace to promote sustainable tourism throughout Arizona. Our presenter today is Andrew Leary. Andrew is the National Outreach Manager at the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics. Andrew and the tourism team from Leave No Trace have been working with AOT to craft Arizona tailored messaging so that we can help promote and protect Arizona outdoor resources and enhance that visitor experience. In addition to Leave No Trace, Andrew has worked in the adventure and travel and tourism field for over a decade, leading clients on international and domestic sea kayaking and ski adventures. But before I hand this over to Andrew, I want to mention very quickly that we will have time for a Q&A session after Andrew's presentation. There is a Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. Just go ahead and submit questions that way, and we will process the questions as we get them. And with that, I hand this over to Andrew.
Well, thanks, Kiva, and good morning to everybody. Welcome to day 2 of virtual GCOT. I hope you had a great first day and really had some good takeaways from those great keynotes that shared some insights around tourism happenings, and especially my colleague, Dana Watts's insights about Leave No Trace. I'm really excited to be here with you all. This Arizona partnership that the center has working with everybody in the state is really exciting and is really going to be a big turning point for a lot of impacts that are happening in Arizona. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. Before I get started, I did want to do a little bit of a land acknowledgement. I'm going to be talking about outdoor spaces today that we traditionally think of as federal, state, and public lands here in Arizona. And those lands are the traditional and ancestral homes of the Hopi Pueblos, Western Apache, and Hohokam. And in addition to that, there are 22 federally recognized tribes in Arizona. Ancestral stewardship and Native communities that have been practicing environmentalism and stewardship for thousands of years. It's super important to acknowledge that as we talk about stewardship moving forward between Leave No Trace and the state of Arizona. So just to give you an overview today, I'm going to start with a little bit of Leave No Trace, the what and why, go a little more in depth over what Dana mentioned yesterday. And then I want to give you some resources so that you can start effectively talking about Leave No Trace and the importance of stewardship within your destinations, with your customers, and with your staff. Toward the end of the presentation, I'll give you a little information about getting involved with this new state partnership and what that might look like for you. And then as Kiva mentioned, we're going to have some time for Q&A at the end of the presentation as well. So I'll start off with what is Leave No Trace. If you caught Dana's keynote yesterday, you got a little taste of this. Leave No Trace is the most widely recognized stewardship education program in the US. Many people are familiar with the 7 principles of Leave No Trace, but Leave No Trace is much more than the 7 principles as well. There's a nonprofit organization, the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics, whose mission is to protect the outdoors by teaching and inspiring people to enjoy it responsibly. Our main mission is education, as opposed to other types of conservation groups where protecting lands might involve purchasing large swaths of land so they can't be developed and things like that. Our approach is through the channels of outdoor recreation and everything that orbits outdoor recreation, including environmentally responsible behaviors, so that we can inspire a new generation of people to take action to protect the outdoors. Some people, when they hear about Leave No Trace for the first time, say, well, why does the outdoors need protection? And there are lots of ways to answer that question. But the way that I'm going to answer that question today is because when we recreate outdoors, whether it's hiking, biking, large group picnics in a park, however you define outdoor recreation, there is some form of an impact that is left on the land or water resource. Those impacts can be really detrimental over time, especially when we think about the cumulative effect of thousands and thousands, if not millions of people visiting these lands each year. Think about all of the headlines that you may have seen in Arizona recently about trash and litter in national forests, or certainly the issue of people littering from their cars on highways and the potential to start wildfire fires from cigarette butts and other things like that. These are behaviors that we can do something about, but they do have long-lasting effects if we don't take the steps to educate people about what's going on and what they can do about it. So I just wanted to give you some of a reference point for some of the impacts that I'm going to be talking about. And the first one are impacts to vegetation. I'm sure many of you have seen this before, certainly with cactus that may have names or initials carved into them, and certainly trees along trails that have these really awful scars that show that people have been there before us. And the vegetation impact, the issue here is that when we carve into bark, or when we carve through that outer layer of a cactus, we're exposing the vegetation to disease and potential dehydration issues when it comes to losing moisture. And so these plants will eventually die. And this is unfortunately a negative impact of recreation that we can do something about. Other impacts are to wildlife. There are a whole host of wildlife impacts, and every year in the news, there are always stories about people in large national parks who are getting too close to animals and having negative encounters with them, potentially being harmed. This particular image that you see is from California, and this is a black bear that got into somebody's food at a campsite. And this is problematic for a few reasons. One, campsites are notorious places where wildlife know that they can find food, and that food is traditionally not healthy for them. Human food, what we consume, what is in this photo, is not a part of this bear's natural diet. The other reason it becomes an issue is because animals are really smart and really efficient with how they search for food, how they forage. So if there's a source of food available to them that's easier than scrounging for berries or whatever they might normally eat all day, they're going to go to that. And that's exactly what this bear did here. What's interesting about this photo is that you see the tub that's poured over with Doritos bag and some other things that are laid out. There's a brown rectangle on the right side of your screen, and if you're unfamiliar with certain campsites, that's actually a box that's intended for campers to put their food into and secure it from bears. So when food is in there and the door is shut, bears cannot get in, and that's a really great way to protect wildlife as well as humans from these negative encounters that could happen. In this instance, the door was simply not shut. So it was a user error that led this bear to gain access to this food. The other thing that's going on in this photo, if you look at the bear's ears, you see a yellow and orange tag. Those tags were put in by the land managers in this particular area of California. Most bears have a 3-strike policy, meaning that when they have one encounter, they're going to get tagged once. When they have a second encounter, they're going to get tagged twice. And that third encounter, they're either going to get transported really far away from their home, think 60 to 100 miles type thing, or what's even more common in various states is that they're going to be euthanized. So whenever there's a wildlife human interaction in the outdoors related to recreation, the wildlife always lose in this case. Here's that example of humans being too close to a herd of elk. It's possible that these elk are going to react in a negative way. They could charge these people. The people could get harmed. But again, ultimately, the elk are going to be the ones who suffer because of how land managers tend to deal with wildlife encounters. So what can we do? Sure, we could advocate for change from our land managers, but what I think is more important is that we can take our own actions and our own behaviors to say, I'm too close to this animal, and help people realize that they're too close to wildlife. There are also campfire impacts. Leave No Trace is not against campfires. We're just very pro-responsible campfires. As Dana mentioned yesterday, there's a very, very high percentage, over 80% of the wildfires in the United States are started because of the unintentional consequences related to campfires. So that's a big deal. We can do something about it. This particular image shows another consequence of campfires, that people tend to burn trash. Um, there's a big issue with burning trash. It can attract wildlife, absolutely, just like the bear photo showed. But burning trash releases all these very toxic carcinogens into the air. And I would gather that the people at this campsite were standing around or very nearby. And so they're inhaling that, especially if they're elderly or young people who are in the area. Think kids. Like we can do something about people inhaling these things that are very toxic for us. The other issue with trash, and we say this at the center a lot, is that trash breeds trash. Meaning that if I'm someone who's new to camping and I come out and see that this fire pit that I'm going to use has trash in it, I might think that it's okay and this is the norm thing to do for me to burn my trash. So it's just going to promote more and more people to think that it's okay to burn trash. And then the last thing is that burning trash, as you can see here, it did not burn it down all the way. So it's leaving this really awful social impact as well. If I'm someone coming out into the outdoors and looking for solitude or looking for a break from everything that's going on, I may show up at this campsite and say, wow, this really negatively impacts my experience because I can see that other people have been here and it doesn't quite feel like the experience that I want to have. So there are a lot of things going into campfire impacts. There are also soil impacts, and soil impacts have relationships with vegetation impacts as well. But the big issue that you see here is that this image looks like maybe it's a trail for a vehicle to drive down. But what it actually is, this is a trail from Montana. The trail on the right started off as a single path for hikers and backpackers to walk on. And over time, what happened is that perhaps because there was mud on the trail, perhaps because of other reasons, people started walking off trail. And mud is a really big reason that people walk off trail. People don't want to get their shoes wet, their boots wet. Mud is dirty, it's all these things, but it turns out mud is actually a really durable surface that can take the impacts of us walking through it. And if we're prepared and going into the outdoors, we probably have footwear that we're okay with getting muddy. I certainly wouldn't bring my new shoes to go hike on a trail like this, for instance. So what ends up happening is that when people hike off trail and avoid the main trail for whatever reason, mud or otherwise, it's going to start trampling down the vegetation and compressing the soil. And when the soil is compressed, that vegetation can't get any more oxygen. Water tends to pool in those areas, so it kills off the vegetation pretty quickly. And it doesn't take very long for that to happen. There's research studies that show that a pass of a group of 7 or less can make a tremendous impact on wet grasses and other vegetation that are sensitive. And so what happens that other people behind them, again, not knowing that that's not the right trail, will see that like, oh, that's the way around the mud puddle. So they're going to start walking around that. And very quickly, you get these other trail phenomenons that happen. This is called a braided trail. So what's the big deal with this? Well, you have vegetation impacts. There could be sensitive vegetation on either side of the trail. Think about in Arizona, if people are walking off trail in certain areas and trampling cactus and the soil, the very sensitive soil that cactus and other desert vegetation grow into, it's going to start driving those further and further back. So far, the impacts I've been talking about are ecological, but there are definitely impacts from other visitors. Those are the social impacts related to Leave No Trace. And those can be really small and they can be really big. And so this is an example of kind of the smaller end that could be big for some people, but in a lot of places in the United States, rock stacking is a thing that people like to do in the outdoors. This particular photo was taken not too far away from my office in Boulder, Colorado, where people really love to stack the rocks. Again, it's something that when when hikers and visitors walk up to this area, and if they don't know any better, they're going to see this and be like, oh, this is allowed here. This is the norm. It's okay for me to do this. And this is actually not allowed in this area. So all of these different rock stacks that you see, this rock garden, if you will, the land managers have really tried to mitigate people going off trail to do this by putting up signs, by putting up fencing, but people still do it. So I've worked with trail crews before in this area that they've told me whenever they go to this particular site, they pretty much have been told to kick down all these rocks and disperse them. Now, what's the issue from a social impact in this particular area? Some people may not find this to be very impactful. Other people are going to find it to be impactful. Another issue related to stacking rocks is that in certain areas of the country where there aren't trail signs that can be put up, rock stacks are usually called cairns. In Acadia National Park in Maine, the cairn system is used. So imagine these rock stacks are actually what's helping to guide you along your way because there is no trail or there is no trail sign. So if there are all these other rock stacks that start showing up, that could really start confusing hikers who don't know any better, which leads to people getting lost, which leads to potential injury or harm, and definitely search and rescue, which has some other impacts related to the environment. So this is kind of a smaller, medium-sized impact from other visitors. This next one's a little larger, and I think is certainly a newer phenomenon in terms of the conservation movement. But with the access that we all have to these things, to our phones, to social media, to sharing, there's really been a great uptick in people wanting to visit the outdoors. I think it's great that people want to visit the outdoors. Unfortunately, not everybody does it responsibly. And sometimes the images that we see on social media do not reflect what is a responsible way to interact with a certain environment. So this photo is from Horseshoe Bend. And as you can see, people are sitting really close to the edge, and the gentleman in the white, or the person in the white shirt, I should say, seems to be posing for the photo, for the person taking the photo behind them. If you were to go to hashtag Horseshoe Bend, I'm confident that you would see thousands of people's photos doing this exact same thing. So why is this a social impact? Well, one, it's encouraging, this behavior is encouraging other people to say, this is the thing that I should do here, and this is safe and okay for me to do, despite their signs saying, stay away from the edge, sheer drop off, like those types of things. The other thing that it can do for other people is cause like really tremendous anxiety when they see this. Like imagine if you're somebody who's a little more safety inclined and you have your family out there and you see people who are sitting on the edge of these rocks, maybe they're taking safety precautions, but maybe not. That can cause some tremendous anxiety and impact your day in a negative way. I'm sure that you all have heard various stories from the Grand Canyon of people taking selfies and unfortunately falling and dying because of as a result of their injuries. And so I don't think social media and technology is a totally negative thing. It can absolutely be a positive thing, and that's something we'll talk about here in a little bit, but it can cause a negative impact for other visitors, potentially for the vegetation and wildlife and other things like that. All of these impacts are interconnected. They're not just existing in their own silos. So important things to keep in mind. Another tremendous impact that we especially see in the American Southwest and in Arizona in particular are impacts to cultural resources. So these petroglyphs at Kaibab National Forest in northern Arizona were vandalized some years ago with this paint that you can see, and you can barely see the petroglyphs behind it. A whole host of reasons why this is an impact. One reason being is that these petroglyphs are actually protected under the Archaeological Resource Protection Act of 1979. So federally, these petroglyphs are protected. Aside from that, there's a complete lack of disrespect for cultures that have called these lands home for thousands of years when people decide to do this. And in addition to that, there are social impacts related to this. Some people's experiences might be ruined by seeing that ACE wrote their name up on this petroglyph. Other people might think, hey, it's okay for me to do this because it exists. Nobody has taken this down, so it must be okay for other people to do it. So cultural resource impacts are a huge thing as well. And then the final impact that I wanted to just share about are water resource impacts. Outdoors and outdoor recreation and water are go hand in hand in a lot of areas. And I know that Arizona has many bodies of water that people like to recreate on, and that is great. I love spending time on the water, whether in a boat or swimming or kayaking. But there are some really big issues when it comes to water contamination, and one of the biggest is related to invasive species. So these are invasive species, just to give you my definition, are species of aquatic animal, in this case. These are quagga mussels in the image on the right. But these are aquatic animals that have been introduced into an area where they were not previously. And because of their ability to adapt in those areas and also take resources from to exist, they're going to minimize the chance that other aquatic species are going to be able to survive. But mussels in particular, quagga and zebra mussels, have a big impact on drinking water supply. So it's not an issue of if these mussels are in your water, you cannot drink the water. It's an issue of these mussels get into the pipes and to the waterways where we transport from a reservoir into a residential neighborhood, for instance. And so what that ends up happening is that the land manager or the water management company is going to have to essentially dig out all these pipes, because these mussels, that image in the bottom right is a pipe that's cut in half, just to show like how quagga mussels can clog up everything. So there's a huge economic impact that can come from invasive aquatic species entering into these bodies of water. So the Don't Move a Mussel campaign is, I know, popular around Arizona, and there are other things that we have here in Colorado, same thing. So this is just an example of water resource impacts that could happen because people are transporting these mussels on their boats or on their trailers, and they don't know it. You can't always see these mussels when they're in their very young state, but when they grow bigger, that's what the bottom right photo can end up looking like. So super important for people to rinse, drain, and dry their boats before entering any body of water. And I actually recommend doing it after you leave a body of water as well, because you never know what you're going to be transporting. Okay, so those were a whole lot of impacts, and there are definitely impacts that are a little more specific to Arizona. There are impacts that are specific that we see all over the country, but that should give you a good gauge about what type of impacts I'm talking about. So how do we educate people about that? How does Leave No Trace approach teaching people that these impacts, one, are negative, and two, we can do something about it? Well, the way that we do that, and have done it for over 25 years, is through the 7 principles of Leave No Trace. These principles that are listed here on your screen are, if you can imagine that Leave No Trace, as Dana mentioned yesterday, is based in science. We do a ton of research to make sure that these principles and the recommendations within these principles are all relevant and still true today. So a ton of research. Imagine Leave No Trace as a giant cloud above your head in terms of information. The 7 principles is the easiest way to communicate this information to people in a concise way that inspires them to take action. So the 7 principles really talk about the what and the how you can be practicing responsibility when you're recreating outdoors. And I think the most important of these 7 principles, which I'm not going to go into in depth right now, there are resources that I'll share that can give you all the information about these, but I think the most important is the first one, which is plan ahead and prepare. Because if people are fully aware of the areas that they're going to recreate in, if they are prepared with the knowledge from land managers and other local resources that are going to help them stay safe and minimize their impact to the land, then these other 6 principles don't really become an issue. So plan ahead and prepare is a huge, huge part of Leave No Trace. And if you only have time to talk about Leave No Trace with one principle, I would definitely recommend plan ahead and prepare, because that one will make the most difference in terms of people's happiness and enjoyment of the outdoors, while also minimizing their impacts. So there are some ways that are really great for talking about Leave No Trace in an effective way that people are going to feel inspired, people are going to feel engaged, and that's going to make a difference. So when I talk about effective Leave No Trace communication, I'm talking specifically about communication related to those 7 principles. Dana mentioned yesterday that we have this great list that can really help you understand what are the ways that I can share this effective information in my destinations and with my customers and potentially with my staff. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I wanted to touch on some of the ones that I think are less apparent when people think about Leave No Trace and stewardship. Because traditionally, when folks encounter the 7 principles of Leave No Trace for the first time, they're encountering it on a trail sign. They're in a national forest and they are at the start of a trailhead, and it says, "And please remember to practice the 7 principles of Leave No Trace." These effective communication methods I'm going to talk about will really help bring Leave No Trace into a different kind of mindset. And I think that's really important as we move forward in through this partnership, working with residents and visitors alike in Arizona. So the first one is that Leave No Trace, when it comes down to it, is a values program. It's related to responsibility. It's related to respect. It's related to caring. Those are all tenets of stewardship as well. But those values they don't exist in a vacuum only in the outdoors. Respect, responsibility, and caring are all things that most of us heard growing up. We heard in school. If you're a person, if you attend an institution of faith, you heard it there. I was a kid who grew up in the YMCA after school program in Chicago. I absolutely heard about these values through those kind of out of school time opportunities. So these values are everywhere in our human existence. We're learning them. That doesn't necessarily mean we're always practicing them or always doing them as great as we can be, but we've learned about them and there are a lot of opportunities. So to the extent that we can make Leave No Trace related to these everyday values, that's just going to make it all the more impactful for people when they go outdoors. So how do people learn values in their lives? We talk about values. We teach about values. We demonstrate and model values. And then we celebrate and recognize those values in different ways. And talking about Leave No Trace is the exact same way, or in this case, stewardship, is that we can talk about stewardship. We can teach stewardship. We can demonstrate and model it. We can celebrate and recognize it. The importance here is that values, somebody can't be taught about respect in just one session and then they go forth with the rest of their life and they know everything about what it means to be respectful or responsible. It takes time. It takes multiple doses, if not daily doses, of what these values mean, coming from different places to understand that. And that's how we should approach stewardship as well. We cannot expect people to just read a sign one time and think that they're going to practice the most responsible ways to enjoy the outdoors. We really need to help cultivate those values within them. Another really effective way to communicate Leave No Trace is through inclusion and representation. I'll start with this first. So Leave No Trace exists here in the United States, but we also have branches in other countries. And this is actually from Leave No Trace Australia. And they have taken the 7th principle of Leave No Trace, be considerate of other visitors, and they have made it specifically about being considerate of the rights of the traditional landowners in Australia, Aboriginal people. So I'm just going to read this out loud because I think it's really important. Today, we must consider the rights of traditional landowners as well as share the wilderness with people of all recreation persuasions. There is simply not enough country for every category of enthusiasts to have exclusive use of land, wilderness, trails, bush, lakes, rivers, and campgrounds. With Arizona, with over a quarter of the land in Arizona being tribal land, tribal community land. I think it's super important that moving forward, and as we talk about Leave No Trace in Arizona with visitors, is that we acknowledge and try and bring those visitors into the very real sense that we are visitors on other people's lands. That there are communities that have existed here for thousands of years, and in the scope of a timeline, outdoor recreation is very young compared to the homes of these other folks. So I think this is really great what Leave No Trace Australia did, and I hope that we can also do that within Arizona as well. Yesterday, there was a question that came up in the keynote. Will there be Leave No Trace things translated into other languages? Absolutely. Translating things into other languages and making it inclusive for people so we can invite more diversity and more understanding is super important. And not only with all of the international languages outside of the United States, but I think absolutely English and Spanish language Leave No Trace is something that Arizona visitors and residents will benefit from. And the center has a lot of resources for that already, but we're really excited to work with the Arizona Office of Tourism, and you all for that matter, to make sure that these resources are inclusive of everybody who recreates in the outdoors. And then the last one I wanted to touch on about in terms of effective communication is relevance in people's lives. The 7 principles, when they were originally conceived, they came from a sense of backcountry. They came from a sense of when you were going out and not seeing anybody in wilderness areas or wilderness quote areas, when you are in solitude for weeks. That used to be the way that people engaged with the outdoors. And many people do still engage with the outdoors in that way. They go on extended trips into areas where they don't see anybody, where if they had any medical issues, it would take several days for them to reach medical help. These backcountry areas are definitely present in the United States, but I think more so, and there was a report from the Outdoor Industry Association that showed that more than 60% of people who recreate outdoors, this report came out last year, more than 60% of people who recreate outdoors do it within 10 miles of their own home. And I think that's profound that, you know, how do the center has really taken steps to adapt the historic sense of the 7 principles into this more front country type settings, what we refer to it as. So day trips, overnight trips, trailheads that might be right outside a community or something like that. And those types of communications are really going to resonate with visitors as well as residents within Arizona. Other relevance in people's lives is, you know, a sign of the times. We're in a pandemic. The pandemic is not going away anytime soon, as far as experts have been telling us. So how do we adapt to that? And the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics actually has recommendations for getting outside during the COVID-19 pandemic. This document, I'm sure you cannot read it on your screen right now, but this document is actually available at lnt.org. The Arizona Office of Tourism website also has some resources that share this, but relevance in people's lives is super important, and connecting with your customers and your staff and your destinations in general. How can you make Leave No Trace relevant for the experience that they are having today, as well as what they're going to have in the future? So this is just an example of how we're trying to be relevant in people's lives. Okay, I know that was a whirlwind about what effective communication looks like. It is not my expectation that you heard me talk for the last 10 minutes about what effective communication looks like, and now you can go forth and proactively work within your destination and work with your visitors to teach them about stewardship. Some of you might be asking, where can I find more information so I can start talking about stewardship in a meaningful way with my destination and the community that I come from? Certainly, lnt.org has a lot of great resources. The Arizona Office of Tourism website has resources, but this is kind of my transition point into talking about this partnership that the Arizona Office of Tourism and the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics have forged together and what we hope to do with it. So this, I should say, this partnership is very young right now. There are resources on the Arizona Office of Tourism website, tourism.az.gov/leave no trace, where you can find some great information to start learning about Leave No Trace and start sharing this out with your community. But this is really it's a anchor, it's a placeholder right now, because what we're doing behind the scenes, my team as well as Kiva's team, is coming up with some really great Leave No Trace messaging that is specific for the state of Arizona. Education materials and training opportunities are specific for folks within the tourism industry and the outdoor industry, and potentially the corporate industry that might be joining this partnership. So definitely check out this website if you haven't already seen it. There's some links back to the center's website with a free online training that you can take to really learn the foundations of Leave No Trace. But I did want to chat for a little bit about what the goals of our partnership are and really how you can get involved with those goals. So we have kind of 5 basic goals in our partnership, and I'm going to go through them and chat a little bit. The first one is really to produce effective and actionable Leave No Trace tailored messaging. So those 7 principles and the associated bullet points, the what it is, the how you can take action, and the why it's important. All of those are going to be Arizona specific, because as I mentioned, there are impacts that occur in Arizona that may not be occurring in other places. There's also a sense, and we have detected this over a number of years, that if we can turn Leave No Trace into having a local voice, and to expressing the culture and the views of the area that we're in, the Arizona voice, if you will, it's going to be that much more powerful for the visitors that we're welcoming into our destinations and our communities while they're traveling with us, but also encouraging residents who may be in those communities or maybe visiting from other areas of Arizona to participate in this initiative to help protect Arizona lands related to outdoor recreation. So really great messaging is coming down the line. There's going to be, throughout this messaging, reliable, science-based, easily understood. Those are all really important in terms of effective communication, things I didn't talk about today, but are totally a core part of what Leave No Trace is. Information and education for Arizona residents, visitors, tourism members, outdoor industry partners, and other stakeholders. So it's not just the 7 principles for people who have never encountered them before, but it's also resources for you and your staff and other folks within the tourism industry who can learn about Leave No Trace and then act as a conduit to talk about Leave No Trace in meaningful ways. I'll touch on that in a second. Number 3 is we want to increase visitor and resident understanding of potential impacts and instill a desire for them to care about Arizona land. So we really want them to understand, wow, impacts occur and I care to do something about it. So in 5 years, we want to look back and say, yes, we were able to increase visitor and resident sentiment in terms of impacts are occurring and I can do something about it, and I want to do something about it. Number 4, we want to reduce the negative impacts to Arizona lands resulting from outdoor recreation, leisure, and tourism. The outdoor industry and the attraction that so many out-of-state visitors and international visitors have to come to Arizona is huge, and the economic viability of that is something that we want to keep going for generations to come. There's a saying that we have at Leave No Trace that we're always generating more visitors and more people, but we are not generating more lands. So these land and water resources, these outdoor resources, are finite. We need to protect them because there's a real implication in the tourism industry that if Arizona lands and water resources, if something happens to them and significant impacts occur where closures might take place or people just aren't interested in visiting certain areas anymore because they're trashed, those tourism dollars are going to start going different places. So we really want to reduce those negative impacts to keep Arizona lands and water resources evergreen, if you will, moving forward so that the tourism industry and communities can continue to thrive with the millions of visitors who come to Arizona each year. And then lastly, we want Arizona to become a nationwide industry leader that helps to protect public lands while also supporting this tourism-driven economy. Yesterday it was mentioned that Arizona is the second state in the US to have a formal partnership with the US. And so there is a tremendous opportunity that other state tourism industries are going to look to Arizona. What is Arizona doing to protect lands? And what can we do to do what they are accomplishing? That is a significant honor when other states are looking at you and saying, wow, they are working hard to educate their visitors and residents, as well as have significant change that makes an impact for their economy in a positive way. So those are kind of our 5 big goals. There will be much more information coming out in the coming weeks and months about how we plan to achieve those goals and kind of the longer term plan. I had a question for you all who are in attendance. So I'm going to put up a poll real quick. So there's going to be a poll that shows up on your screen. And I'd love for you to take a second and just answer that poll. I'd love to see who is in the room with us right now. We have hotel lodging, DMOs, some tribal community members as well, attractions, state, city, town. So there's a real mix of folks that are in the room with us right now. And that's important because what I'm going to transition to talking about is how you can get involved as a partner. Let me just share these polls with you real quick. So you can see a lot of DMO partners with us right now. And then folks from other areas of the tourism industry as well. Thank you for joining this. I think it's super important that we recognize the diversity among the tourism industry, because that is going to completely affect how we educate one another in what it means to be a steward of the outdoors in Arizona lands. Sorry, there we go. Next slide is how you can get involved. So I mentioned there's going to be some really great messaging that comes out of this partnership as a foundation, and then some collateral that comes out of that. But really the way that we're going to make the biggest change with this new partnership is with your help. Obviously you're attending today because stewardship or leave no trace or something orbiting that theme is important to you. So in the coming weeks, we're going to have some information about how your destination or your agency or your organization or your community can get involved and be a partner of this initiative that we have going on. So I invite you to think about joining us as a partner, as a tourism partner or an outdoor industry partner. Some of the things that you're going to get as a partner. So you're going to have access to digital and print resource collateral that you can share with your destinations. The Arizona Office of Tourism is doing a tremendous lift, as they have done for many, many years within the Arizona tourism industry, to help provide resources to you all so that you can use those. We don't want anybody reinventing the wheel here, but we also want consistent messaging. And so that's what we hope to achieve with the print and digital resources that you'll have access to share with your communities. There's also going to be education and training opportunities for staff that are really going to help those folks effectively engage visitors with this new Arizona tailored messaging. Aside from Leave No Trace, I do work in the tourism industry, the adventure tourism industry here in the US as well as in Europe. And I've been the boots on the ground staff interacting with clients. I've also been the staff in the office who's managing the program and directing it. And 100%, the biggest variable for this program being successful will be the staff who interact with visitors and customers and their ability to talk about what it means to be a steward of lands in Arizona as it relates to this new initiative. Print collateral and digital things are really great and are largely passive. But if we can use these things and then talk about them in a real way and have significant conversations with folks, that is going to make all the difference. And that has made all the difference here in Colorado, as well as in other smaller areas of the United States where we partner with folks and provide education. Again, Leave No Trace is an education organization. This is our bread and butter. This is what we do. And so we're really excited to bring these education opportunities and training and professional development for you and your staff so that you can effectively talk about Leave No Trace. We're also going to have some other resources available to partners that are going to help support your own stewardship initiatives and pledges. I know that many destinations around Arizona have taken it on within their strategic planning, within other kind of formal means. Sedona, I know, has done this to incorporate stewardship and Leave No Trace into your vision for your destination. So we are going to work with different DMOs and different groups to say, hey, what is it that you're working on and what can we provide to you? And we've already started those conversations. Those things are going to continue as well. So look forward to that you're going to have support and help with the strategic planning, things that you have going on, and resources related to that. And finally, this I think is maybe the smallest thing, but makes a big difference, is that there'll be a digital partner badge, collateral that we'll share to your community and to your visitors to say, we're a member of this initiative, and protecting Arizona lands through responsible recreation is something that we are really interested in and hope that you find interest as well. There's data out there in various tourism sectors that say that there's a growing population of visitors who are seeking out destinations for their stewardship mindfulness, for their environmentalism, things like that. So I have no doubt there are people that visit Arizona right now who are doing that, but we want to encourage more visitors who are going to bring more dollars into the state who have that mind, because there are not a lot of tourism organizations that are focusing on stewardship as a means of economic viability in this way that Arizona is approaching it. So these are just some of the resources and benefits and things that will be available to you if you choose to be a partner. Again, I welcome you into this initiative. It's going to take all of us and all of our efforts to help make change in Arizona. There are a lot of significant impacts, but I think we will be able to achieve that and do it with some really great synergies and work together well. So stay tuned for more information about how you can become a formal partner in the coming weeks. And we're really excited for that. So I'm just going to leave it there for now so that we have some time for Q&A. But I hope that you walked away from this learning a little bit more about what Leave No Trace is, why Leave No Trace is an important program, some ways that you can start talking about Leave No Trace, and then also the ways that you can partner with the Arizona Office of Tourism within this new initiative. So Kiva, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Andrew. That was great. We really appreciate everything you guys are doing, and we are very excited about moving forward with you on this program. We do have time for a Q&A if people want to start submitting some questions. We do have one already in the queue, Andrew. I don't know if you want to take a look at that. That might be more of a question for our land managers than what I can get.
They can, land managers will definitely be able to answer this more specifically, because there's not just one Arizona land management agency. There are many land management agencies, both state and federal. So it's hard for me to answer. I know that I saw a news story from a few years back that there was public outcry when a land management agency was going to euthanize a bear that had an encounter with a camper, I believe. And when I was reading the article, it led me back to another story from 1997 where there was a land management agency that decided to relocate a bear after a negative encounter with humans, but that bear actually came back to that same campsite and had a very negative, harmful encounter with a teenager. So I can't say for certain what happens, but it sounds like euthanizing wildlife that are considered, quote, troublesome, although I think it's the people who are troublesome, not the wildlife. I think euthanasia as well as relocating animals are probably in those land managers' policies, as they are here in Colorado and in other states around the US. But a land manager would specifically be able to provide you that information.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions coming through. Well, if that's the case, then we'll wrap it up. And, you know, I appreciate everything you guys are doing. And if you have any questions moving forward, we're here. Just reach out anytime. We will happy to answer any of the questions that you have. And with that, thank you for joining us. Please be sure to check out our next guest speaker, which is Chris Fields, and he'll be up at about 10:15. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.